insanity is doing the exact same fucking thing over and over again, expecting shit to change. That is crazy.
God damn if it isn't fun. The collapse is gone. The world as we know it is over.
The real bloodletting has begun. We're gonna cure these men of their disease, you and I. We're gonna pull it right out of their veins. What do you got there? Diamonds?
Quake! And the sun became black! And the moon turned to blood! Who the fuck is it going to be? Them or me? Me or them?
When things get out of control.
One fucking chopper, you couldn't fucking do that!
Do you understand what I'm saying? Nobody kills me. Nobody. I'm the one who decides who lives and who dies. Me.
The thing is, up there, way up in the fucking skies, you thought you had your finger on the pussy trigger. But hermano, down here. Down here. You hit the ground.
The Far Cry franchise holds a special place in my heart. While the games are by no means perfect, being thrown into an unknown nature setting, on your own, thousands of miles away from Western civilization, is always a very enjoyable experience for me. The first Far Cry game was actually the first shooter I ever played. Me and my friends would play the game every day, treating it like a survival horror game and trying our best to complete the levels with our limited FPS experience. I would be lying if I said I didn't jump out of my chair multiple times from a Trijang launching at me out of nowhere. That playthrough remains one of my most memorable gaming experiences. For a while, I didn't really pay attention to any subsequent releases in the series, as I started to primarily play multiplayer games. But when I heard about the release of Far Cry 3 in 2012, I knew I had to give it a try. And when I got the game in December, my Far Cry trophy hunting journey had begun. Far Cry 3 is probably the most beloved Far Cry game ever made, and I can definitely see why. It starts off incredibly strong, with a very compelling introduction to one of the main villains, Voss. Your older brother gets killed, and you escape at Voss's mercy. You then track down one of your friends, and the objective of the game is to find and rescue the rest of your friends and escape the island. You're now free to roam and explore this beautiful tropical setting to collect items, complete quests, and progress the story. Rook Island is a blast to explore, and it's super easy to get lost into this game. Experiences like paragliding to a boat to find an ancient artifact, almost drowning, and then waking up on the shore during sunset are extremely memorable and are what I like so much about the Far Cry games. The first half of the game is undoubtedly the strongest half story-wise. Voss is the main antagonist at this point, and his monologues are both intriguing and terrifying. He is almost certainly the most praised attribute of any Far Cry game, and his death at the end of the first half is for sure the biggest flaw of the entire game. The final antagonist of the game, Hoyt, is nowhere near as compelling, and the game really starts to lose its momentum during the second half. When the ending came around, the story lost me completely, and I didn't really care anymore what happened to any of the characters. It's well known that Voss wasn't originally intended to be in the game, and I feel like if the developers had a second chance, the game would revolve around him, and Hoyt wouldn't even be included. But aside from my qualms about the story, I still really enjoyed my entire playthrough. The only major flaw I think the world has is that the side quests typically lack character and are a bit generic. In any case, not too long after my first playthrough, I found myself compelled to revisit the Rook Islands. I really just needed an excuse to explore more of the world, and I thought it would be a neat idea to try to unlock all the trophies to earn the game's Platinum Trophy. It's worth noting that when I got this game, I didn't pay attention to trophy lists at all, and I hadn't unlocked a single Platinum. Completing side quests and finding relics across the world was overall an extremely enjoyable experience. The single player trophies are generally easy to obtain, and the only trophies I had trouble with were the co-op trophies. Nobody really likes the co-op mode and its story, and as a result I couldn't find a reliable partner to complete the trophies with, so this ended up taking a week. The last co-op trophy was the final trophy I needed for the Platinum, so after obtaining it, I unlocked the Far Cry 3 Platinum, 6 months after originally starting the game. Also, apologies for the awful quality. The recording is 8 years old, and apparently I hadn't figured out capturing in HD yet. All the next recordings will be in better quality. During that same time, the Blood Dragon DLC for Far Cry 3 was released, which was basically a wholly new game for only $20. Despite its generous price tag, however, I don't have a whole lot to say about this game. It's an over-the-top, Terminator-like action game with an 80s synthwave theme. Overall, I liked playing through this game and was engaged for its entire runtime, but at the same time I never had the urge to replay it. It is a short and simple trophy list without the platinum, and only one trophy that required some farming, for which you had to buy all the weapon upgrades. Within about 2 weeks I was able to 100% this game. About a year later, in February of 2014, to celebrate the 10-year anniversary of the Far Cry franchise, the original Far Cry game was suddenly re-released for the PS3 with a trophy list. I think there was less than a minute of time between me hearing this news and me actually downloading the game. I got through the entire game in a few days, and this playthrough really reignited my love for this game. The story of Jack Carver uncovering the secret government experiments on this gorgeous island remains one of my favorites of the entire franchise, despite how cheesy it can be at times. The game often gets flack by critics for the mutant twist a few missions in, but for me this is one of the best things about the game. The Trigens add a lot of variety to the missions, and when incorporated properly, they can create interesting dynamics. For example, the launchers in the dimly lit treehouse facility create an incredibly tense atmosphere and make you feel like you're playing a horror game. In the bunker level, the cages of some Trigens can be opened, meaning they'll attack the guards, for which you'll also earn one of the trophies. What I also love about this game is how memorable every single mission is. As I'm writing this, it's been years since I've even touched the game, and I can still remember the names and settings of each of the 20 missions. Steam and Rebellion are my absolute favorites, and by far the most immersive missions from this game. In both missions, you have to roam around the island at night, completing objectives, while an entire army of both mercenaries and Trigens is trying to hunt you down. Damn, the second to last mission, is also an experience I won't soon forget. You're stripped of your entire arsenal and thrown into the jungle, where you have to run for your life while being chased by every Trigen variant you have encountered so far. The last mission, Volcano, is the most hectic by far, and starts off with you defeating Krieger, the person in charge of all the experiments, and seemingly the main villain of the game. However, in a dramatic twist of events, it turns out that Doyle, the person guiding you throughout the whole game, has been using you all along. Now that you killed Krieger, Doyle is planning to steal the show and sell the serum used to create Trigens. Doyle also had Jack infect himself earlier in the game, so Jack is slowly becoming a Trigen himself. Jack is obviously furious and infiltrates the heart of the Volcano facility, chock full of the strongest human and Trigen enemies, killing Doyle and acquiring an antidote. The entire facility explodes and Jack manages to escape in the nick of time, leaving the island safely and sailing off into the night. Obviously, it isn't the most emotionally captivating story ever written, but it never pretends to be anything more than an action-packed shooter with an interesting setting, which is why I've always liked this game so much. To me, this is one of the most timeless Far Cry games in the series. During this playthrough, I mostly got story-related trophies and the easier miscellaneous trophies, like falling 150 meters without dying, not dying during the gate hacking section, and a few others. I didn't complete the list to unlock the platinum yet, so for now we'll be moving to a completely new setting, far away from the Micronesian island from the first game. The next Far Cry game I played was released only 2 years after Far Cry 3, and it's the game with the shortest development time of any of the main games by far. This game takes place in the fictional Himalayan nation of Karat. Of course, I'm talking about Far Cry 4. By the time Far Cry 4 released, I had turned into a full-blown fan of the franchise and got the game about a month after it was released. By this time I had read some reviews and listened to a few commentaries about the game, most of which criticized the game for essentially being a Far Cry 3 clone, with a villain inspired by Voss and nearly identical gameplay. I bring this up because against my expectations I ended up really enjoying this game and finished the story in about a week. I think the mountainous landscape of Kyrat is an amazing setting, and unlike Far Cry 3, this game has a bunch of interesting side quest storylines. The story itself is kind of messy though. You play as Ajay Gali, a former Kyrati citizen who has made a return to the country to spread his mother's ashes in a specific location. Of course, this doesn't go as planned, and as you enter the country, your vehicle gets apprehended by border guards, and as you escape, you inadvertently get involved in the ongoing civil war between the rebel organization called the Golden Path and the country's tyrant Pagan Min and his royal army. Pagan Min is a very eccentric and flamboyant man, and is obviously heavily inspired by Voss. In contrast to Voss, however, Pagan Min is, initially at least, very friendly towards Ajay, which was to the detriment of the experience for me. The world felt too welcoming, and unlike other Far Cry games up to that point, I had some trouble taking this game seriously. Where this game did succeed though in comparison to the third is its mission variety. You will often depart from the world to visit some absolutely stunning vistas, like the highest mountaintops of the Himalayas, or the dreamlike world of Shangri-La. When you reach the end of the game, you get to either kill or spare Pagan Min. If you choose to spare him, he joins you in returning your mother's ashes, revealing that he and your mother were once in a relationship. Pagan Min leaves the country after this, making you the new ruler of Kyrat. I don't particularly like this ending, or any ending in this game for that matter. It's way too uplifting, and now that it's revealed that Pagan Min never truly meant you any harm, it makes you feel like you were never in any real danger throughout the game. Like I said before, I genuinely enjoyed playing through this game, but it didn't feel like a true Far Cry experience. Regardless, it would only be a few months after I completed the story that I returned to the game to tackle the trophy list and unlock the platinum. Far Cry games to me are exceptional in that I actually thoroughly enjoy roaming around the world and finding all the collectibles, because the world is so fun to explore. One additional feature Far Cry 4 implemented that ended up greatly improving this experience is that when you discover new locations and landmarks, the game tells you how that location is known to the locals. For me, this made these locations, that would in previous games seem really generic, feel real and meaningful, which made the entire world feel a lot richer and connected. The trophy list for this game was very similar to that of Far Cry 3, with it being mostly single player trophies that can all be achieved with some grinding, and the only somewhat annoying trophy being fully packed, for which you need to farm the final fortress for a few hours to acquire all the skills. There is one other trophy though that turned out to be a real pain in the ass. Changing lanes requires you to perform a vehicle takedown from the passenger seat. In other words, you have to find another person to play co-op with, have him drive you around for a while until you find another car. Since you're playing online, connection becomes a factor, and the takedown prompt doesn't always show when it should. I ended up finding someone who was kind enough to help me out, and after roaming the map for a while, I was eventually able to unlock this trophy. After this, it was only a matter of mopping up a few miscellaneous trophies, and after 6 months, I finally earned the PS3 Far Cry 4 Platinum Trophy. Far Cry 4 has a DLC as well, Valley of the Yetis, which was added to the game with a few additional trophies. It's nothing special, but for the $15 you're paying for it, it's worth the money, since you're thrown into an entirely new world, with new enemies and new mechanics. The trophies were all fairly simple. The only one I didn't earn by simply completing the story was the trophy for fully upgrading your home base. So after that, I had 100% completed Far Cry 4. At this point, I realized that I was possibly getting very close to completing every single Far Cry trophy list. I had fully completed 3 games and was on my way to complete the 4th one. I got excited about this and looked up if there was any more Far Cry games for me to complete before I could say I fully completed the Far Cry franchise. But my excitement quickly turned into disappointment as I found out what game there was still left for me to complete. Far away from the tropical islands and the mountain ranges I had visited so far lies a Far Cry game, set in the ruthless, sun-baked African savanna that is in practically every regard the most unforgiving Far Cry game ever released. Its trophy list is notorious and includes one of the rarest platinum trophies of the PS3 generation. Of course, the game I'm talking about is Far Cry 2. Far Cry 2 is for many reasons the black sheep of the franchise, but for now I will focus on one. It was released in 2008, right after trophies were implemented into the PlayStation Network. The developers of course had no idea what a normal trophy list would look like, so the trophy list for Far Cry 2 includes a ludicrous multiplayer section. The player base for the multiplayer died out very quickly after the game's release, so to earn the trophies now, your only option was to boost them with other trophy hunters. But these trophies can't be achieved with any ordinary afternoon-long boosting session. They require multiple days of in-game playing time, meaning that you have to dedicate a month or two to boosting these trophies. Soldier of Misfortune is the main culprit here. This seemingly benign trophy requires you to acquire field manuals for all weapons. What this means is that you have to complete every challenge, like getting 250 headshots or 250 multi-kills for every weapon, thereby maxing them out completely. The minimum amount of kills that you can earn this trophy with is 9,000 kills. It's completely insane and by far the most time-consuming trophy in any Far Cry game. But of course, you can argue that while this does take an absurd amount of time, it's technically not difficult, since it can be earned by anyone with the right determination, making this Platinum's difficulty perhaps overrated. That's where War Party comes in, which is the game's second brick wall of a trophy. Win a match with 16 players. Simple enough with a populated player base, but when I started looking into this game, those days were long gone. So for me to get that trophy, I would need to organize a session with 15 other players and have them let me win, and nobody could leave or disconnect. This trophy is just a nightmare, and I made a promise to myself to only get this game and boost for the other trophies if I could find a group organizing a boosting session for this trophy. Well, sometime after doing my research, that day came around, and I found a group of people that seemed to be serious about getting this trophy. I took the plunge and downloaded the game, and a few days after, that planned day finally came around, and to my relief it went pretty much flawlessly, and I ended up earning this infamous trophy. After this, I drifted around a few boosting sessions to unlock the multi-kill portion of the Soldier of Misfortune trophy, and the trophy for getting 500 revives. When this was done, I felt a great sense of relief, because at this point, remaining kills for the Soldier of Misfortune trophy and the rest of the multiplayer trophies could all be boosted with one other person. Luckily, I still had an old PS3 laying around, so I didn't have to rely on other people anymore. 2 months and over 60 hours of boosting later, it was finally time for this almost insurmountable task to come to an end. I unlocked the remaining trophies shortly after, and after I reached level 30 for the final trophy, Warlord, which can thankfully be glitched, I had fully completed the multiplayer section of this game. It was now time to turn to the single player. I had actually left the single player of this game completely untouched when I was boosting. This was the only Far Cry game I had never played, and I really had no idea what it was even about. Even today, Ubisoft pretty much pretends that this game never existed. It is the only main entry in the franchise that was either never re-released or isn't available to play on the PS4 generation of consoles. I was super eager to play it, and I had reserved this experience for when I was done with boosting as a reward for the grinding. And what a reward it would be. Far Cry 2 starts off incredibly strong. You are a mercenary being transported into this unnamed African country. The country is wrapped up in an ongoing civil war, which is largely fueled by a mysterious arms dealer known as the Jackal, who is supplying both sides of the conflict with weaponry. Your goal in the game is to kill this Jackal figure. The Jackal is my favorite Far Cry villain of all time. He often gets lumped in the same groups as characters like Voss and Pagan Min, but he is nothing like them. The Jackal is not part of the organization trying to hunt you down like Voss. He's not hiding in a fortress behind an army of guards like Pagan Min. The Jackal is a lone wolf, like yourself, who is in just as much danger as you are, because the moment he shows his face to anyone, he's a dead man. The protagonist and the Jackal are essentially on an even playing field, yet the Jackal is clearly far more powerful and competent, which makes him a very compelling adversary to me. Surprisingly enough, at the start of the game, after you've been transported into the country, you have a brief encounter with the Jackal. He reads out the file, giving you the objective to kill him. The Jackal isn't fazed at all by this, and teases you for already failing so hard at this task.
The target's presence in the state continues to be a destabilizing influence. He's largely responsible for the recent influx of weapons into the country and clear violation of the joint signatory framework. His reputation as a dangerous arms dealer is well deserved. Orders are to terminate. Well, that didn't work out the way they planned. I'm still breathing and you're the one with malaria.
After preaching some of his nihilistic ideas to you, he leaves the room and lets you live.
You know, there's a book I read a long time ago. Still think about it every day. It helps me understand life out here. The book talks about men, about what motivates them. Simple, really. A living being seeks above all else to discharge its strength. Life itself is will to power. Nothing else matters. So long.
This is the last time you meet this character for a long time. From now on, you'll only hear from him when he's mentioned by others, or when you find any of his very intriguing interview tapes that are scattered around the map. I love how his myth is built up in this game, and it starts to make you wonder whether your encounter with him was real or just a hallucination. To progress the story, you start doing mercenary work for both the UFLL and the APR, the two factions perpetuating the country's civil war. Doing this work, of course, only fuels the internal conflict, and halfway through the game, it backfires on you. You get overpowered by one of the factions, and your dying character is transported to the desert. After finding some shelter, it is the Jackal who shows up to save your life. After all the wars he's been involved in, he's starting to resent the indirect consequences of his actions, and he tells you that he now sees the warmongering leaders of both factions as a virus that needs to be quarantined. You lose consciousness again and have to resort to fleeing to the more dangerous northern part of the country. Once there, the cycle of doing grunt work for both factions is continued until the final act of the game. My favorite mission of the game is when you need to collect a briefcase full of diamonds to facilitate the deal. The briefcase is located in what is supposed to be a heavily guarded outpost, but once there, you just find piles and piles of bodies. When picking up the briefcase, you get ambushed by the Jackal, who had apparently wiped this place out before you got there. He knocks you out and uses you as a scapegoat, while he takes off with the diamonds. Near the end of the game, despite the previous occurrences, you meet up with the Jackal, who convinces you to wipe out the entire leadership of both factions and to blow up the border, allowing the citizens to flee the country and free themselves from the war. The idea is that both you and the Jackal perish in completing this task, which in the Jackal's eyes will free the country of the disease of war and redeem yourselves from the awful atrocities you've both committed. You follow along with this plan and blow yourself up at the end of this game. The Jackal presumably dies as well, but his body is never found. The story is, admittedly, very messy, especially during the second half. The Jackal's change of heart at the end isn't really supported by anything and feels contrived. I would have preferred it if he remained a cold-hearted arms dealer that was constantly outsmarting you throughout the entire game. However, among fans, this game is not praised for its story, but rather it has one distinct quality that no other Far Cry game has been able to pull off as well, and that is that this is possibly the most immersive game I have ever played. Your character is not an overpowered superhero like in the other games. He is extremely vulnerable and frequently suffers from malaria attacks. Your weapons degrade and fall apart over time. You can't fast travel out of sticky situations, as you can only take a bus that can transport you to a few designated locations. This game, especially on the higher difficulties, is incredibly unforgiving and requires you to exist and survive in this world for long stretches of time. This undoubtedly takes some getting used to. In fact, it took me a very long time to get into this game, but when I finally understood the function of its mechanics, I practically became obsessed. It can be a grind at times for sure, but the end result is that this is the most unforgettable experience you can get from a Far Cry game. I will forever treasure my time in the African savannah, and if this game ever gets remastered with some tweaks to the storyline and maybe some added side quests, it has the potential to be one of my favorite single player games ever made. Most of the single player trophies are easily missable, and I wasn't really paying attention to the list anyways, so I still left most trophies unearned after my first playthrough. Before my second playthrough though, my attention drifted away to a different Far Cry Classic, since I hadn't actually obtained the platinum yet. The reason I started playing it again was that over the past year I had been replaying the game on the realistic difficulty for the Carver style trophy with a friend of mine, whenever we were gaming at my house. This was one of the friends I originally played this game with when I was young, so revisiting this game to reminisce on old times was a very memorable experience. Realistic difficulty wasn't nearly as bad as I thought it was gonna be, with only the last 2 levels causing us some issues. Eventually, 2 years after my last trophy earned on the game, I earned the Carver style trophy and only needed to obtain the last few trophies to unlock the platinum. The trophy list is very unique compared to other Far Cry games, and most trophies are a ton of fun to earn. Wildlife Safari, for example, requires you to beat the dam level without equipping a weapon. The only trophy that caused me a ton of grief was Ninja Jack, requiring you to collect the keycard in the research level without being spotted. The stealth mechanics don't function at all in this game, so most of the time the guards have no trouble spotting you instantly, even if you're completely concealed in foliage. It's weird because in most guides people seem to just be able to run across the edges of the map, not being subtle at all, and not be spotted. But for me, this never worked, though after trying for hours, I was finally able to sneak my way past the guards and earn Ninja Jack. This game had been sitting uncompleted in my trophy list for over 2 years, so now it was time to bid my farewell to this tropical island for good, fittingly enough in the only mission taking place during sunset. Now that this platinum was in the bag as well, I started my second Far Cry 2 playthrough to clean up on the rest of the list. Most of the single player trophies are fairly easy to earn, be it that they can be missed if you're not paying attention. Most trophies simply require you to complete a subset of side quests or explore every quadrant of the map, and I was able to earn most trophies fairly quickly. One trophy turned out to be a major grind however, a bronze trophy called Wages of Conflict, for which you need to acquire both the diamonds you get from completing story missions and every single diamond from the 221 briefcases scattered around the map. It took a while, but like in other Far Cry games, this world is so gorgeous and filled with environmental storytelling that it was genuinely a pleasure to travel around the world to collect all the diamonds. This was the last trophy I needed to unlock the platinum, so when I got around to finishing this task, all the hard work I put into this game was going to pay off at last. Almost a year after biting the bullet and starting this boosting nightmare, it was finally time for the journey through this African landscape to come to an end, and for me to earn the most infamous platinum trophy of the whole series. Even today, this remains one of my proudest platinum trophies. At this point, the only Far Cry Platinum I was still missing was the Platinum Trophy for Far Cry Primal, and after taking a half-year break from the franchise, I started to play this entry as well. Now I'm not going to be talking too much about this game, because to tell you the truth, when I started making this video, I completely forgot this game even existed. It introduces some new mechanics and, like most Far Cry games, looks phenomenal, but overall it hasn't left any meaningful impression on me. The characters are boring, the villains are forgettable, and it doesn't have much of a story. I do remember really liking the missions where you hunt down and in some cases tame some of the world's most fearsome beasts, but that's about it. The trophy list features exclusively single player trophies, so this was smooth sailing from beginning to end, and within a month I was able to unlock this platinum. At this point, I had earned every single trophy available in the Far Cry franchise. Excited about this achievement, I made a post on the PSN profile forums and on Reddit asking if I was one of the first people to accomplish this feat. And, rightfully so, I got a lot of backlash. I had earned every unique trophy in the series. However, Far Cry 4 was released for both the PS3 and the PS4, and I had, of course, only completed the PS3 version. The trophies don't stack, so if I truly wanted to earn every Far Cry trophy, I would have to spend a ton of time replaying a game I had already fully completed. This seemed ridiculous to me, so I made the decision to spend my time playing different games. But as time went on, the fact that I had put in so much work to reach a goal, only for me to barely miss the mark at the end, started to bother me more and more. About a year later, in 2017, I gave in and purchased the game for the PS4. To my surprise, this game actually has tremendous replay value. I fully completed all the side quest storylines this time, which I enjoyed immensely. Helping former warlord Longinus atone for his sins, and traveling through the mythical land of Shangri-La, freeing it from the demons that are invading the land, are among my favorite side quests in the entire series. Despite the fact that this game was 3 years old, I was relieved to find out that the multiplayer was still somewhat populated, so I was able to earn the one multiplayer trophy with relative ease. The Changing Lanes co-op trophy went a lot more smoothly this time as well, and the Yeti DLC, while not really having any replay value, was luckily pretty short, so completing it didn't take much time, and within 8 days I was able to fully complete this game and earn the platinum. This is still the fastest platinum trophy I've ever earned, and, more importantly, I could now finally say that I owned every single Far Cry trophy. Though this wouldn't last very long, of course, because the next Far Cry in the series, Far Cry 5, was only months away. Far Cry 5 is the most excited I've ever been for a Far Cry game. I thought the setting of rural Montana was an amazing idea, and the premise of a small county being run by hardcore religious totalitarian lunatics left me very hopeful that this game could truly be something special. It's the first Far Cry game I ever got on release, and when I first got to fire the game up, I was ecstatic. It starts off like a typical Far Cry game, with you getting stranded in a hostile territory, but how Far Cry 5 innovates the Far Cry formula is that the entire map is available immediately, and that you can choose which parts of the map and story you would like to progress first. It's divided into 3 regions: the Holland Valley, ruled by John Seed, the Henbane River, ruled by Faith Seed, and the Whitetail Mountains, ruled by Jacob Seed. And once all these regions are completed, you get to confront Joseph Seed, who is the main villain of the game. I really loved the design and atmosphere of these regions, and it was a joy to explore them. However, like I said before, you get to choose which region you like to start with, and thus get to make significant choices on the order the game progresses in. I strongly dislike this, since in order to make this work, each of the storylines of the regions needed to be generic enough so that it wouldn't matter in which order you went through the game. I would have much preferred it if there was just a set order. Having freedom in how you can play through the story has absolutely zero value to me, and I think in this case it's obvious the story suffered greatly as a result. What also really pissed me off was that if you reach about 75% completion in a region, you get this hostile aircraft following you around everywhere, trying to kill you. It does nothing for the game, and it's just a major annoyance. The story itself was very lackluster in my opinion. You play as a police officer tasked with arresting Joseph Seed, a religious cult leader who has taken over power in this small county in Montana. Things go awry and you get separated from your crew. The main objective of the game is to find and save those police officers and follow through with Joseph Seed's arrest. I think Joseph Seed is a spectacularly boring character. He is clearly once again supposed to be some vast ripoff, but he lacks any form of nuance and his dialogue feels super generic. There's not a single Joseph Seed scene that was memorable to me. Most other characters in the game sadly suffer from the same issues and are completely lacking any form of personality, with Faith Seed being the only notable exception. But what I hated most about this game is that the majority of the inhabitants of this world are these bizarre caricatures who don't take the situation they're in seriously at all. This completely kills the illusion for me that I'm in a dire situation and that the life of my character is truly at stake. This game has no consistency and is not immersive at all. In the canonical ending of this game, as you try to arrest Joseph Seed for the second time, a nuclear explosion goes off in the background and you get stuck in a bunker with Joseph, meaning that Joseph's prediction about the world ending was right all along. I think this ending was really dumb, but I wasn't very invested in the story anyway, so I can't say it bothered me very much. So now that all the negative stuff is out of the way, you'll probably be surprised to hear that, by and large, I really enjoyed playing Far Cry 5. The world really is stunning, and side activities like the Clutch Nixon stunts and the Prepper Stash puzzles were a ton of fun for me, and kept me engaged throughout my playthrough. But by far, the biggest redeeming quality of this game, which single-handedly made me happy I bought it, is the soundtrack. It has by far the best soundtrack of any Far Cry game ever. It all starts with this calming main menu music, setting the mood for the game perfectly, but doesn't end there. Each of the 3 regions has a unique iteration of the core soundtrack. The Holland Valley is represented by a choir.
Oh Lord, the great collapse won't be our end when the world falls into the flames. We will rise again.
The Whitetail Mountains by mostly indie and folk rock music.
Oh Lord, the great collapse won't be our end when the world falls into the flames. We will rise again. We will rise.
And the Henbane River by the trance-like post-rock. This last album in particular, made by Hammock, is one of the most amazing and unique works of music I have ever had the pleasure of listening to. Almost every single song on this album is a masterpiece, and they fit the game, and especially Faith's euphoric, bliss-induced world so amazingly well. I still listen to this album on a regular basis. The trophy list is very similar to other Far Cry games and consists mostly of things like distracting enemies with rocks, getting a headshot from a long distance, and partaking in side quests. These mostly have to do with the world and not with the story, and as such I thoroughly enjoyed hunting these trophies. The trophy list does have the biggest multiplayer section since Far Cry 2, which were kind of a pain in the ass. You mainly need to level up your character and win matches on a certain set of maps, which took some time to get, though this time the servers were still populated thankfully. What you've probably noticed is that I typically don't complete the entire trophy list when I first start playing a game, as I prefer to play a game casually first, unlocking some trophies and then return to the game later. Far Cry 5 was no exception to this rule, and I left the main game alone for some time. This game did, however, have a decent amount of DLC releases that following year, the most of any Far Cry game so far in fact, and for all of these I did make a return. Hours of Darkness was the first release, where you are lost in the Vietnamese jungle during the Cold War and need to travel across the land to reunite with your crew and escape, with lots of side activities along the way to partake in. I really liked this idea at first, and was excited about getting the trophies, in particular the trophies for beating the DLC on Survivor and 80s action movie difficulty. That was until I found out that there is no minimum amount of missions you need to complete, and you can literally just book it to the end when you spawn, making the trophies a cakewalk. Overall, still a cool DLC though, if you take some time to explore. Lost on Mars was next up, which is about a main game character getting abducted to Mars, where you need to stop an alien invasion to save the Earth. It introduces many new enemies, weapons, and mechanics, and is by most people considered to be the best DLC for the game. I really enjoyed it as well, and all its trophies are fairly doable, mostly requiring you to find collectibles and kill all the world's boss type enemies. Last up was Dead Living Zombies, where you go through stages, fighting through hordes of zombies. Some of these stages are actually pretty challenging, and it features the hardest set of trophies of the DLC releases. 2 in particular will take some time to earn. One of these for getting a gold medal on all of the 7 stages, which is barely possible to do solo, so you need a reliable co-op partner, and even then, some gold medals are quite tough. And the other is for killing 5,000 zombies in total. After completing the rest of the trophies, you'll only be about halfway through, so this one is quite the grind. I didn't like this DLC very much either, so most of these trophies took me some time to get. The most substantial part of Far Cry 5's release cycle was a remastered version of Far Cry 3. Replaying this game with better graphics was a blast, and what made it especially refreshing was that it doesn't suffer from my main critique point of Far Cry 5. Far Cry 5 feels too lighthearted, with all its bizarre characters who don't act like the situation they're in is at all worrying, which makes me struggle to take the game seriously. Thankfully, Far Cry 3 doesn't have this issue, and largely portrays heavier themes. The trophy list is almost exactly the same as the original, barring only the co-op trophies and the Rakyat score trophy, and as such it was very doable. I got addicted to exploring this world again, and got all the trophies fairly quickly. One location in the game that intrigued me this playthrough was this small lonesome island, far away from any important story location, with no people or animals inhabiting the place. There's just some old ruins, a few chests, and a relic. I thought it was the perfect place to unlock the platinum here. While I was planning to unlock the Far Cry 5 Platinum not too long after this, some real life things got in the way, and I took a year-long hiatus from playing new games and trophy hunting in general. When I returned in 2020, I found out that a new Far Cry game released in 2019, Far Cry New Dawn, taking place once again in Hope County, years after the nuke went off. The surprise of this game existing turned out to be a very unpleasant one though, because as I got the game and played through the story, it became very clear that the sole purpose of its development was to half-ass this bogus game and cash in some easy money. This game is impressively bad, and its world, story, side characters and villains are painfully bland. I always try to find something positive to say, even of games I criticize heavily, but with New Dawn, I'm honestly at a loss. It seriously has zero redeeming qualities. It takes everything I disliked about Far Cry 5, like the bland, personalityless characters, and ramps them up to 11. No relationship is ever properly built up in this game, so during story moments that are presented as significant and emotional, I can't help but roll my eyes. I don't believe for a second that anyone felt even a hint of emotion during scenes like this. The villains are your typical recycled Far Cry bad guys, without any of the nuance of previous villains. They're just evil for the sake of it, and they fail to make any impression on me. And don't even get me started on the awful aesthetics and added health bars in this game. Furthermore, everything I enjoyed about Far Cry 5 is absent. The world looks terrible now, and the soundtrack is forgettable. What's interesting about the trophy list is that I think it clearly shows that the developers were well aware of this game's blandness, and added all these relatively extensive descriptions to fool you into thinking that this game has any character. Thankfully, this trophy list was a walk in the park overall, with the only obstacle being the return of my Far Cry nemesis, the co-op trophy, for which you need to complete 3 of the newly implemented expeditions. This isn't difficult, but nobody plays this god-awful game, so finding a co-op partner took some time. After unlocking this, it was smooth sailing, and when I returned to the game a few months later, I unlocked the platinum. Now that this platinum was in the bag, it was time to return to the only Far Cry I still had to complete, Far Cry 5. It was mostly miscellaneous trophies, with the biggest obstacle being to beat the fishing records and complete all the hunting challenges, which there are a lot of, so this took some time. Like I said before though, I really enjoyed exploring this world, so it wasn't a chore at all. Not too long after, I could finally claim my very last Far Cry Platinum trophy. The only trophy I still had to earn was the DLC trophy for completing Far Cry 5 on the added, infamous difficulty. Newer Far Cry games, even when played on the highest difficulty, are typically pretty easy. Far Cry 5 Infamous was no exception, and if you use the weapons from the Lost on Mars DLC, becomes laughably easy. I breezed through the game in a couple days, and when I reached the end, I unlocked my trophy, which meant that I had achieved my goal. I had earned every single trophy from every single Far Cry game. I reached the end of the road, and my journey had finally come to an end. To reach this goal, over a period of 8 years, 476 trophies were earned, 9 of which were platinum, and 10 Far Cry games were fully completed. In completing these trophy lists, 698 collectibles were found. 176 outposts were liberated. 70 radio towers were climbed. 339 skills were learned. 1,061,000 total of whichever local currency the game had was spent. I killed an enemy from a great distance, a total of 10 times. And 95 enemies were distracted by rocks. Most importantly of all though, across these games, an unforgettable experience was had. The Far Cry franchise is my favorite single-player franchise of all time. The rough circumstances you're thrown into, contrasted by the beautiful landscape you get to explore, makes these games very addicting for me. Especially if I've had a stressful day, I find getting lost into any of the exotic settings these games take you to be a very meaningful way to spend my time. Despite all this, you've probably noticed that the tone of my commentary towards the end of this video was generally more negative. I still liked playing games like Far Cry 5 a lot, but I would be lying if I said that I didn't think it was overall a massive step in the wrong direction. I want a Far Cry game to take itself seriously and be consistent in its themes. If the situation in a world is dire and hopeless, the characters should act like it. This is why I'm so fond of Far Cry 2, and why I think Hurk is basically the worst thing to ever happen to the franchise. I know Far Cry 6 is releasing later this year, and while I haven't watched any trailers, I am confident that it's going to be a game I will enjoy very much. Of course, a part of me is hoping that this time Ubisoft will step up their game and deliver a grounded open world game with actual good writing, akin to games like Red Dead Redemption 2. But I know that realistically the chances of that happening are very slim. And if the writing and characters are as uninspired as in the latest entries, at least there will be an amazing world for me to explore again.